Well, good evening and welcome. So, this week we're going to be looking at crimes against persons, which include such crimes as homicide, rape or sexual assault, assaults, aggravated and simple assaults, and robbery. Now, we're going to be looking at what they call typologies of these types of crimes. In other words, what is it that might cause a certain person to commit this particular type of crime? How can we categorize them? In other words, what characteristics exist among the offenders, the victims, the environment that the crime occurs in. Researchers look at all of those different things to see if they can try to figure out why certain these types of crimes happen. So we're going to be looking at all that, including some of your favorite topic, serial killers. So by crime typology, what we're talking about is how we classify crimes based upon a particular dimension. Remember, your project, you're dealing with social dimensions of crime, and you look at those characteristics basically about people, your gender, social status, race, age. You look at those. Well, we classify violent crimes due to legal categories, what laws exist, motivation of the offender, how the victim may have behaved, situational factors, what is going on in the environment that might have contributed to this crime, and characteristics of the offender. Homicide is the first one we want to look at. Homicide is categorized in several different ways based upon the intent, circumstances, age, etc. It's really fairly rare when you look at all of the crimes that exist, and a small fraction of reported violent crimes. Usually involves acquaintances or family. A lot of times it's preceded by an argument, and there are various socio-demographic patterns that exist with regard to homicide. Wolfgang and Ferracuti studied what they call the subculture of violence, and they looked at violent offenders and found that victims and offenders had a similar background, similar socio-demographic characteristics, and they knew each other really well, intimately known to each other, family, friends, etc. But what they also found is the racial composition of an area alone does not have a significant effect on crime rates. And we've talked a little bit in class about the different types of crimes, different communities involved in crime. Society today, they talk about race and ethnicity with regard to crime. Wolfgang and Ferracuti didn't really find anything with related crime as far as the racial composition.
Mm. I don't think any of them went down to do their surveys.
That's really cruel.
I
There were a couple. Well, I went in there. There were a couple people in there.
Oh, good. So maybe
Told you there was that one guy who said I was like stalking him.
Oh, so okay. So maybe we got a couple.
But
more.
I don't know whether he actually went and did the survey.
Because I tried again. I was like, okay, guys, break. Go take your surveys. There's candy. Yeah.
Oh well. I tried. You know, I totally changed my attitude about it before I went in the classroom. Because I was like so negative in my head. And then I figured, well,
you were definitely still oozing negativity.
No, I was not.
It was covered in sucralose. A fake sugary substance.
Nah.
You dropped the F-bomb.
Well, that was because these guys, I got these looks
guys, I know.
on certain people's faces. I'll see, he's like, what the F's he doing in here? Yeah.
It's ridiculous, right? It's ridiculous.
I can read faces.
Just take the gosh darn survey.
Well, whose box is this?
And David Winton comes in late, and he left early, and he works a lot, and he was like, literally, he could barely keep his eyes open. I don't even know how he's driving home.
This is really funny. So somebody got their cloak, I guess, delivered here.
Uh-huh.
It's still addressed to Amar Palaveram.
Oh. Yeah, he hasn't been the dean for a while.
I don't know why they didn't change the name on the account. That's really weird. Of course, why is the box sitting here on the floor? I don't know either. Did somebody intend to throw it out or just leave it here? I don't even know whose it is. I know Ganther was waiting on one. But I don't know why the box would be sitting over here.
Hey.
Hey, look, there's Frank Mackey.
It's me.
So I got a hold of Charles Boykin. Okay. And Charles Boykin, it was a very interesting conversation in text messaging. He had his job hours changed.
Oh, okay.
And he's like, well, I got to get a hold of the dean to change my classes around.
Okay.
Because my work schedule changed. And I'm like, well,
It's a little late.
You need to be here tonight to show up for class so you don't get dropped from this class. And then maybe if you show up, we could change your work schedule. But the only other section of his class is on Wednesday morning, which already went by. But still, he has to be here for... Either he needed to decide to switch and joined your class this morning, or he had to show up tonight. And he said, I'm sorry, I can't, I got to work till... I said, is there any chance, if you just need to change your thing because of work, could you just show up tonight, and then we'll switch you into the morning class? He's like, I wish I could, I'm here till 3 o'clock in the morning. He's working till 3 a.m. Well, I tried, and I already put that in S3, so there's probably nothing you got to say in S3 other than delete or close out whatever's there for you.
One more person showed up.
Oh, yeah?
Jackie, so I only have 3 access.
Woohoo!
One of which we know why he's out.
Yep. Yeah, and I already entered that earlier, too.
Oh, did you? Thank you.
Yeah.
Why do I not have access to S3?
Yeah, neither do I.
But you were utilizing S3 just fine, right?
Well, the manager access was working. Let me see if my instructor access works. Yeah, that opens. Oh, why do I have all these open entries from last week?
Mine's not open.
Oh, and my stuff from...
I think it might be this computer, though, because...
No, because it's that. Genevieve couldn't get in either, and somebody else said they couldn't get in. Oh, Hauger said he couldn't get in either.
Huh.
I thought I wrote notes for these people. Why is this not here? It's very strange.
Okay. Frustrating stuff.
Frank, I'm supposed to be able to have access to the surveys, right?
The when they're completed, yeah,
Yeah.
but not till like after it closes.
Okay. But when it does, right? When
Yeah.
I log in, I
Yeah.
log in with my full name at activitytech.edu.
Same. Well, you use the same.
Because it keeps saying I need to change my password.
Something freaky with the system again.
Okay.
Did you have that same issue when you logged into the computer?
No.
Because it's all the same login.
I know, and I just changed the password because of it.
But I had I had an issue in a classroom last weekend or last week when it was telling me to keep changing my password just to get into the student portal, and I didn't need to. If you refresh the screen, then all of a sudden it logged me in.
Oh.
And I changed my password because of that too.
Oh. Alright. It's the same scenario.
So I'm crazy.
I can't get into S3. Something not working. Alright, let me go back to the students.
All right, so we're going to continue now. Like I said, Wolfgang and Ferracuti, subculture of violence, similar characteristics between victims and offenders, and they intimately knew each other. And again, racial composition really did not have an effect in their study. Structural explanations for homicide, you know from our previous lesson on social structure theories that there are some relationships between crime and the environment that one is living in or grown up in. Some studies suggest that the South has more issues with regard to homicide because of the norms that are dissimilar from the rest of the world or the rest of the country. And there's other structural variables that might have some explanation for it. There is definitely evidence that the South differs from other regions in the frequency of homicide. Victim-offender relationship. Wolfgang did some research, found 25% of homicides were between family members. Women more likely to be offenders, to be both offenders and victims. Males were more likely to be killed by friends or strangers than by family members. If a male was killed by a female, more likely to be his spouse. And we're going to talk a little bit more about some of the issues there, namely victim precipitation, that might result in the killing of the male. Two very important terms you should recall, and you'll probably see them again later on: primary homicides and non-primary homicides. Primary homicides are basically people that you know, involving family members, friends, and acquaintances. Usually these involve expressive crimes that result from acts of interpersonal hostility, like maybe an argument, something like that. 9 primary homicides are the victim and offender have no prior relationship, and the homicide usually occurs as a result of some other crime or during some other crime. You have some instrumental crimes that they premeditate the instrumental crime, and then a homicide might result. They're less likely to be victim precipitated. Dugan, Nagin, and Rosenfield suggested there were 3 factors that could reduce intimate partner homicide and declining domesticity. In other words, people not living together in relationships. Improved economic status of women. So maybe because of the economic status, women are not as dependent upon men. And increase in domestic violence resources, namely because you have an out. A place where, say, generally females can go for safety, a safe house of sorts, counseling, things that might get them out of the relationship before it turns into a homicide. So instrumental and expressive homicide. We know that not all homicide offenders intend to kill their victims. It may be that it is instrumental homicide that begins as a robbery, because the person is trying to use the crime as a way to get money or some other reward, and somehow it wound up in death. Killing of the store clerk, killing of the person on the street that they were trying to rob, something like that. An expressive homicide that would not be premeditated might be an argument ensues between family members, husband and wife, brothers and sisters, brothers and brothers, whatever. And then that argument results in probably an assault, an aggravated assault that then results in death. A sibling offense is simply the offense that might begin the homicide, so it might be the robbery, it might be the argument, whatever it might be. Victim precipitation is simply the concept that the victim may have done something that is a contribution to the criminal event. It's not blaming the victim. It just means that there was something that the victim did that may have started the chain of events that caused the homicide. So say in a road rage situation that ends in a homicide. One person is driving like a nitwit, cuts somebody else off, they get pissed off, they chase them down the road, they start shooting at them with a gun, and boom, somebody's dead. 2 guys in a bar. One guy decides to get a little outspoken, maybe because of some alcohol or whatever, and he gets killed. That's victim precipitation. Again, not blaming the victim for their situation, just says they did something, or maybe it was just simply that they were in the wrong place at the wrong time. That's victim precipitation. Intimate partner homicide does have some patterns of victim precipitation that relate to gender. So those of you that are studying gender as a social dimension of crime might want to take a closer look at this. Many homicides committed by women are victim precipitated. In other words, the person that they killed did something that led the woman to have to use this level of violence, or to want to use this level of violence. Only a small number of homicides by men are victim precipitated. There is a positive, significant association between alcohol and victim precipitated homicides. In other words, one of the other parties involved has alcohol on board, and then it either was the alcohol that caused the victim to get involved in the situation that then led to their death, or the person who kills them is under the influence and they're not inhibited because of the fact that they have alcohol. And we'll get into that a little bit later as well. So weapons are definitely used in some crimes. The type of weapon that's used can affect whether the outcome becomes lethal, and certainly the availability of weapons makes a difference. Right.
Yeah.
No, I just have to stop because people keep hopping in.
We tried to be quiet.
I would go in another room, but then somebody would probably be looking for me.
Let me put myself down.
Okay.
Oh, sorry, Frank. I hadn't realized you were recording.
That's all right. I should have gone in a little room, but then somebody would be looking for me, and I should be gone by now. But
Yeah, I know.
I had problems with my camera earlier.
I always get got problems.
Windows 10 issues. So alcohol and drug use. Goldstein said there was a relationship based upon the use of drugs, the use of alcohol that might lower inhibitions. Some people commit crimes to support a habit, involvement in drugs, and certainly drug trafficking has a history of violence involved with it. Selective disinhibition. The presence of alcohol in some situations may suspend factors that might normally restrain people from violence. But the research is saying that it's social, not biochemical. Alcohol significantly predicts most types of primary homicide. In other words, when they look back and they see primary homicides, usually there's some alcohol involved. So you could suggest that if someone's drinking, especially drinking heavily and is under the influence, they may be more likely to be involved in a primary homicide. Now remember, what does primary homicide mean? Primary homicide is that involving people who know each other. Friends, family, etc. And maybe they're hanging out, drinking, fight, death. Gangs, obviously most of us know that gangs are involved in a lot of violence. Studies are showing us that the gang homicides more likely to involve minority males, usually involve gun use, occur in public places, and usually involve victims and offenders that don't have a prior relationship. Now you may remember a couple weeks ago we watched that video about the two ladies that are involved in gangs in Los Angeles, and the one girl said she actually almost killed somebody. So it's not always going to be minority males, but the statistics generally tell us it's males. Gang-motivated violence is that which is a direct result of gang activity. Gang-affiliated violence is when it is a gang member, but not necessarily violence caused by their involvement. So let's say a gang member has a fight with the father and winds up killing their father. Well, they're a gang member, but they didn't go and kill their father because the gang told them to. Might be some other reason. Serial murder. This is like everybody's passion, right? I can see in there say serial murder, yay! And apparently the world likes it now too, because there are some new shows that are going and following serial murders, like Wicked City, brand new show coming out. It's supposed to be following some serial killer from like 1993 or so. So apparently the world loves that. What is a serial killer or serial murder? Is the killing of several victims in 3 or more events. So they have to be basically unrelated events. So if somebody kills 1 or 2 people on Tuesday, and then Thursday they kill 2 or 3 more, next week they kill another person, that's a serial murder. If they only kill like 1 person today and 1 person tomorrow, it's not a serial until they kill the 3rd person. But it says 3 or more events. So if I kill 2 people at one time and 1 person the next day, not necessarily a serial until the 3rd event. Who those people are? Typical offender, white male, late 20s or early 30s, target strangers at or near home or work. Not always male though. Some of you know about Aileen Wuornos, one of the few female serial killers in the United States. And we're going to talk a little bit more about some background of female serial murderers as well. All right, some of the typologies. Holmes and DeBurger had one of their own, and they had these 4 types: visionaries, comfort serial killers, hedonistic serial killers, and power seekers. Fox and Levin had 3 typologies. And you can see they're similar: thrill-motivated killers, mission-oriented, or evidence-directed killers. So there's relationships between, they only had the 3 as opposed to the 4 that we see in Holmes and DeBurger. Female serial killers, one of the big ones, disciple killer. Remember we watched Helter Skelter. You see the Manson girls. They might be what we would call a disciple killer, because they basically did it because of Charlie Manson's charismatic personality. Kelleher and Kelleher came up with a couple other typologies, the Black Widow, and that might be an example of the female who marries multiple men and they all seem to die, and maybe she makes a lot of money out of insurance or whatnot. Angel of Death, and it's not always female, but Angel of Death. Probably the most common example is somebody who's in the medical field who does things to kill usually very, very sick people who are probably going to die anyway, and they think they're taking them out of their misery. That's the Angel of Death. Some patterns of female serial killers: rarely hedonistic, usually target people they know. Geographically stable, which means they stay within a certain local area. Usually have a longer career than males, and more systematic, believe it or not. So how do we catch these serial killer people? Well, one of the ways is by trying to link information, because you may have somebody who's operating, say, in New Jersey and kills a person, say, in Mount Laurel, where I used to work, so that's the Burlington County Prosecutor's Office is involved, but then that person travels across the Tacony Bridge into, say, Frankfurt and kills somebody over there, and then they come up here to Levittown and they kill somebody there. Well, somehow we got to link those together. Now, those areas are pretty close, so probably not going to be too hard for the local departments to say, wait, I just heard of a similar killing over in Mount Laurel, but will they necessarily put them together? Will they be sharing all their information? Well, one way that we could do that is through the FBI's Violent Criminal Apprehension Program, which is called VICAP, which allows criminal investigators, people investigating homicides, to enter a lot of data about their crimes, and then the computer can make matches. If there were similar methods of operation or modus operandi that the person used to commit their crime, they can make these links and then say, hey, wait a minute, this is very similar to a crime that occurred in Cincinnati 3 weeks ago. So, like I said, it might be easier to connect the Burlington County, Philadelphia, and Bucks County crime than it would be to connect, say, Florida and California. But we know there are serial killers that have traveled across the country who have done multiple states, even though the data shows us that most serial killers are fairly confined to a local area. There are few that have traveled across multiple states. So the VICAP really helps us with that. Also, what helps us is the profiling. FBI profilers have been studying killers for many, many years. There's some really, really good books on that topic. One is called The Mind Hunter, that was written by one of the former FBI profilers. Great book. If you've ever seen the movie Silence of the Lambs, allegedly about a young FBI investigator, if there's actually that TV show that the name of it escapes me. I just saw a promo for it the other night. But you have all these different criminal profilers that are using information from the crime scenes to try to build a profile of the person that may have done it, to try to help locate the person. You also have geomapping. That's getting better and better and better with the software that's available, where you can go to a crime scene and you can locate the points, and then maybe it can help you figure out, well, where's the person going to dump the next body at? And it used to be done by simply using a paper map, but now a computer can do a lot of this work for us and make it much simpler. All right, mass murder. What's a mass murder? Well, that's when you kill 3 or more people at the same time. So somebody goes into an office, a school, or wherever, and kills a bunch of people. Levin and Fox created typology. Why are people doing this? It might be revenge. Maybe somebody gets fired from their job and they hold a grudge against the people that they worked for and worked with, and they go back and kill them. Maybe it's a love thing where the person goes in, maybe they're rejected by somebody and they go in and kill that person and their entire family. Maybe it's for profit. You got to kill a bunch of people to make money somehow. And of course the last one, which we are all probably very familiar with, is that of terror. And 9/11 was probably one of the largest mass murders in history. So, what are some of the factors or elements that may lead to mass murder? Well, there might be some type of predisposition, a precipitating event, and things that might facilitate. All right, moving into rape. Rape is a crime which actually we're going to see in some later slides. You don't necessarily hear the term rape very often because a lot of states have changed the name of the crime and changed the definitions. And usually you hear of it being sexual assault rather than rape because it's a more expansive definition. How many there are is really difficult sometimes to measure because the UCR, Uniform Crime Report, based upon people reporting them, and there are a lot of crimes that don't get reported. National Crime Victimization Survey, NCVS, also has some accuracy issues. The best current measure comes from the National Violence Against Women Survey. There are many myths about rape, and you can see them on the screen. There's what is a myth? A false assumption that characterizes much of the discussion surrounding sexual violence, usually culturally based, and these myths then inhibit people from reporting the crimes. Some examples: women bring false charges to get even with men, women ask for it by wearing provocative clothing, and of course all the research suggests that that's baloney. Women say no when they mean yes. Those are definitely myths. Some common law definitions, and you'll get into more of this in criminal law class, which none of you should have yet, but you will eventually have it before you graduate, and it'll go into what was common law, but this is the list. Common law definition of rape basically involved a woman only. So a male assaulting a woman that wasn't his wife. Didn't recognize male victims. Didn't recognize rape within a marriage. So, under common law, once you were married, that male could go and have sex with the female whenever, whether she wanted it or not. Did not allow for other acts of sexual penetration. Did not allow for various means by which force could occur. Evidence. The victim had to demonstrate physical resistance. The victim have corroboration. In other words, somebody else had to say, yeah, I know it happened. And unfortunately, in those days, the sexual history of the victim could be admitted into evidence. So because, and you look at this, is that the way it is today? No, unless, of course, you're in some foreign countries where, you need to have corroboration of 2 or 3 people before a woman can report this crime, but certainly not here. So there's been a lot of reform. And that reform includes redefining what the crime is and replacing, a single definition of rape with multiple crimes and graded offenses based upon the actual activity that occurred. Eliminated the requirement that the victim resist. Eliminate the need that the victim's testimony be corroborated. And also placing restrictions on the introduction of certain evidence, especially that with regard to the victim's prior sexual conduct. Some states, like I said, changed the terminology from rape to sexual assault. Also, starting in the 70s, rape shield laws were introduced, so it was supposed to protect the victims by ensuring that things that were not relevant to this particular case, and you couldn't bring up stuff from the past and introduce it into evidence if it wasn't relevant to the case. So some of the effects, and keep these things in mind when we're talking about, because your homework assignment for this week actually asks you to explain the differences between common law and modern law rape. Also to explain why reform was necessary, which we just discussed. What have been the most beneficial aspects of reform for rape victims and why? And do you think that there are any other changes necessary in the future? All right, different types of rape. Acquaintance rape. Statistically, the most common scenario, this is when victim and offender have some prior relationship, occurs within the context of dating relationship, and is frequently underreported. There have been a lot of reforms and laws. 1992 Campus Sexual Assault Victims Bill of Rights. There's a lot going on right now. If you look at the colleges, the president's come out and made a big stand with regard to sexual assault on college campuses. And there's a lot of discussion there because it's kind of swayed in the other direction where if a female on a college campus suggests that a male committed the crime, in some colleges, I've read numerous articles, there isn't the same type of due process that we have in the criminal situation, where the colleges are actually dismissing students based upon the allegation, even without sufficient evidence. So it's a thing that's evolving right now. Marital rape. Well, remember, under common law, wasn't a crime. Now it most certainly is, and Russell actually came up with a typology, looking at why would a man rape his wife, and this is the list. You can read that for yourself, and certainly go into more detailed explanations in your textbook. A prison. Obviously, we've probably all heard that there's rape that goes on in prison. Remember Charles Manson in the movie? And of course, that was a character playing him. At the very end of the movie, the prosecutor suggested that he's going to miss his girls, and Charles Manson actually made the comment, there's no problem, there's plenty of sex in prison. Well, there's rape in prison. Have you ever seen The Shawshank Redemption? In that movie, the man who was imprisoned, unfortunately wrongfully, because he did not commit the crime he was imprisoned for, but he wound up being brutalized by men within the prison system. Now, it differs depending upon whether you're male or female. Rape within female prison usually involves male staff attacking female inmates. In male prisons, usually involves only inmates. Although we have heard of many cases, not necessarily of rape, but of relationships between corrections officers and other prison staff and inmates. Matter of fact, that recent escape up in New York State involved a lady who was working, I believe, in a library, who had a relationship with one of the escapees, a sexual relationship, and was supposed to help them to escape. Feminist perspective, you probably should read the section in a chapter to get a better explanation. Basically suggests that gender is a social construct, and that basically rape culture has to do with male aggression as an act of power or domination. Psychopathological perspective, two assumptions. Rape is a result of a disease. Rape often includes uncontrollable sexual impulses. Growth had a typology, actually 3 of them: power rape, anger rape, and sadistic rape. Barron and Strauss had an integrated theory, suggested that gender inequality, social disorganization, support for legitimate violence produce higher rape rates at the state level, and support for legitimate violence refers to norms justifying the expression of violence in certain contexts. Gender inequality related to rape rates because women's social status, as their status increases, rape as a mechanism of social control is challenged. Social disorganization refers to communities' inability to sustain social institutions. We talked about that before in our social structure lecture a couple of weeks ago. Evolutionary biological perspectives. Some would suggest that rape relates to the male trying to perpetuate his gene line, which is an interesting concept, but there are people out there that espouse that. There's studies done on it, and you can read some information about that in your book as well. Again, typologies, just like with homicide, there's been studies in typologies of rapists, another set by Hazelwood and Burgess: power assertive, power reassurance, anger retaliatory, and anger excitation. Stevens, he had 6 of them: lust, righteous, pure, control and anger, supremacy, and fantasy. Scully had admitters and deniers. Moving on, child sexual abuse, something that probably grosses most of us out. Simple definition: someone who engages in sexual activity with a minor, exploits a minor for the purpose of sexual gratification, or exploits a minor sexually for the purposes of profit. And some of you are very interested in the idea of of human trafficking and getting involved with that in career choices later on. That is a big, serious problem throughout the world. Most people despise this type of behavior, but we don't understand it for real. And it is commonly believed that it's underreported. Growth had typologies of this as well. Regressed offenders and fixated offenders suggested that victimization as a child might contribute to perpetuating the crime later on if there's some other factor that intervenes. All right, moving on. Robbery. Robbery is when we combine elements of violence and property crime. Personal robbery is robbing an individual. So maybe you rob somebody on the street, and we talked about earlier, robbery might be a sibling offense to a murder. I don't know if anybody have ever heard of the police officer Moses Walker, who was killed, I believe, in 2012. There were two males who were out in the street at like 5:45 in the morning. Moses Walker was not in uniform. He was on his way home from work, and he was attacked by these two males because they wanted to rob him. He went to defend himself, and they noticed he had a gun, and they instantly shot him. So this was a personal robbery, a street robbery, which then was a sibling offense leading to a homicide. Institutional robbery is a robbery, say, the 7-Eleven, gas station, bank, convenience store, whatever. Certainly has some lethal potential, because robbers generally will go in using some type of weapon. It's the most likely felony to result in homicide. Criminal careers. Most robbers are generalists with lengthy but varied careers, so it's not like there's like a robbery cult. They may be doing other things, and robbery just happens to be one of those things. Very few are specializing exclusively in robbery. Robbery in public transportation. Studies say it's fairly rare, although over the past, say, 6 months to a year, we've heard of a few cases right here in the Philadelphia area on SEPTA of people getting attacked, people getting robbed. So it does definitely occur, but fairly rare. Some strategies to prevent it could be regular crime prevention strategies could be very effective in these settings. Another thing that's at great risk is taxi drivers. Matter of fact, there was a case actually in my town several years ago where a taxi driver was killed, had his throat cut severely. He picked up a fare in Cherry Hill. They told him an address somewhere in Mount Laurel on a street that was fairly deserted at that time in the morning, and once he got to that location is when they attacked him. So taxi drivers are a great risk. If you look at Philadelphia, there's been a few over the years. And now we have the Uber drivers. If anybody saw the video last week of the Uber driver that was attacked, it wasn't a robbery. It was a drunk and stupid guy who was mad because he was asked to leave the Uber. It turns out he was a executive for Taco Bell and wound up getting fired after the video was published. All right, so motivations. Why do robbers rob? Well, usually don't have a lot of planning. It's something generally to spur of the moment. It's not like if you saw Point Break, where those guys planned all these robberies very thoroughly. Guys who wore the presidential masks and whatnot. Now, most robberies are, wow, there's only one guy working at 7-Eleven, I need some money, let's go in and get it. Usually the motivation is their financial gain, but there are some other motives, probably not as common. Somebody who desires to fight. They're going to rob somebody to right an injustice. Rob to enhance their street cred. This might have to do with gangs, and some people might be doing it just for kicks. Drug robberies. Here we have people ripping off drug dealers on the streets because guess what are they? Who are they going to report it to? We've even had cases in Philadelphia. Had the case not too long ago. Camden had a similar case of police officers robbing drug dealers because who are they going to call? Not the Ghostbusters. So how do we minimize the risk involved in targeting drug dealers? Well, they intimidate them, maintain their anonymity, and are hypervigilant. Gender nature robbery, basically fairly simple. men commit more robberies than women. Just like men commit most crimes, men commit most robberies. There are some differences in how they commit them. If men commit robberies, it's usually physical violence and or a gun, usually rob other males, target victims that are involved in the street life, people are out in the street, where women on the other hand, rarely use guns unless robbing a man. Most common approach is to rob females in a physically confrontational manner, and sometimes use their sexuality to attract male victims or act as accomplices. We actually had a case like this in Mount Laurel a number of years ago. There were two guys that were in town on business, and they were in a bar in one of the hotels, and they encountered a woman who apparently was willing to go somewhere with them and have a little fun. And when they went to do this, her partner, turned out to be her husband, showed up and robbed them. And then they took off. One of my officers actually found these two people in their minivan, and he went to approach the vehicle. The female was driving, and the male snuck around and fired a shot at him. Thank God he missed. But we wound up searching this other hotel in town where they were hiding, and it took a good part of the night. So assault. Most common violent crime, simple assault, aggravated assault. Simple assaults are most common, usually hands, fists, and feet, minor injuries. Aggravated assault, you're talking about something where there's a weapon involved or the injuries are fairly serious. Most aggravated assaults are fairly spontaneous. It's not like you plan to go out and beat the crap out of somebody. It just happens most of the time. Stranger assault, low probability of serious injury. This is statistically. There's two primary types. Crimes that involve exploiting a setting. So if something's happening that, hey, look, there's an opportunity, and maybe it's going to be a robbery, and they commit the assault. Or you have a spontaneous encounter between two strangers that results in maybe an argument and then an assault. Usually these involve people that are of similar ages. Although if you recall a few months ago, there was actually an assault on SEPTA, on one of the platforms, where there was an older male that got into a disagreement with a young male on the train, and when they got off the train, the young male basically cold-cocked this guy. So there was a definite difference in age in that situation. So it's not always going to be close ages, but most of them are fairly close in age. Assaults within families. Like we said earlier, the majority of assaults involve people who know each other. It's hard to have a really, really good record of assaults within the family because a lot of them aren't reported. And they're within the home, so nobody sees them except the people involved. So there's probably a whole lot more of them than we know about. Our NIBRS data says that more than half of all violent crimes involve victims and offenders who are related. Assault, most frequently occurring violent crime both among the general population and within the family, and women are more likely to be the victims of assaults within the family than in the general population. Intimate partner assault, or domestic violence, whatever you want to call it, you have a lot of that occurs in our society. So you have people in an intimate relationship who assault each other. Sometimes it's because one wants to separate from the relationship and the other one doesn't agree. And of course you also have the cycle of violence. If someone grows up in a situation where they see that violence is used within the family, so let's say the father is constantly beating on the mother, and the son sees this, and the son may believe that it's normal behavior. And so when he gets in a relationship with a female, he beats on her. Or maybe it's a daughter in the household who sees a mom being beat up all the time, and she thinks it's normal, so she winds up getting involved in situations with men where that happens, and it continues. That's why they call it the cycle of violence. Workplace violence. We talked before about mass murder, about somebody walking into their place of business because they're mad at somebody and go ahead and shooting a bunch of people. Well, there's all kinds of workplace violence. Certainly a problem in our country. We hear about it periodically in the news and in the media. We've heard about school shootings, college shootings. You've heard the term going postal. But there's been other places where people have walked in and started assaulting other people on staff. And it's not only murder, it could be rape, robbery, assault against persons who are at work or on duty. So workplace violence is not only people who work within the situation, but like the Uber driver was working, he's assaulted. Police officers who attacked on the job, that's workplace violence. Various situations, if somebody's actually doing their job and they're assaulted because of their job, might also be considered workplace violence. Some typologies, there's a list. Or you have violent acts by criminals who had no connection with the workplace, just walked in, decided to hurt somebody. Violence directed at employees by those for whom an organization provides services. Violence against coworkers. Violence committed in the workplace by someone who does not work there. Stalking. We're probably familiar with stalking. Conduct that a specific person involves repeated visual or physical proximity, non-consensual communication. Basically someone who's following somebody, showing up where they were not supposed to be. They've been told, I'm not interested in hanging out with you, but they continue to show up. And maybe they write letters, they send emails. The computer has made it a lot easier to stalk somebody these days. And like 10 years ago, or a little bit longer than that, most states made this type of behavior illegal with separate statutes. Some types you see: rejected, intimacy-seeking stalkers, incompetent suitors, resentful or vendetta-motivated stalkers, predatory stalkers. Who are the victims, and what are the relationships? 80% of stalking victims are women. Majority of stalkers are men. Victims usually between 18 and 39. Most victims actually know the stalker, although there have been some cases, even some celebrated cases, where a stalker, stalks a celebrity who's never met this person, and they try to write them letters, they try to, meet them, but the person never met them. Consequences: obviously, the victims are more concerned for their safety. They might need counseling. They might have to take off from work to report to the police or go to court or whatever, and they have to protect themselves. Cyber stalking, as I said, the computer, whether it be Facebook or email or text messaging, there's all kinds of ways that people can get to you. So, this week in class, we're going to be watching a movie called Law Abiding Citizen. Law Abiding Citizen basically covers murder, rape, robbery, all those things all in one, with a follow-up, because the initial crime is a home invasion gone bad, which then turns into a rape and a homicide. But then later on, we have a male who wants to pay back everybody, the criminals and the court system, for not taking care of these guys in the way that he thought they were going to. And we'll have a worksheet and some thought process. You got to figure out, well, what was it that caused these people to do what they did, based upon what we know so far. So hopefully this wasn't too long for you. I will see you all on Friday. Bye-bye.